All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2020 semester, and it's week 13, part 2 of our broadcast. We're talking about today authentication with Passport, and of course we're using Mongoose. So let's talk about how this is all going to work today. So we ended up last day, this is yesterday, with this project, and what we did was we had a couple of things going on. If I can kick this off again, so let's just do nodemon, which kind of puts this up. Again, we're working with the WEBD6201 W2020 lesson 12 up on GitHub, the same one from yesterday. And we're kicking this off. We also need a Mongo connection, so I'm going to say mongod, which is going to bring up our connection to MongoDB. And you can see that this kind of connected for us, right, which is good. And if we check up online, and if I go and put in a localhost 3000, we can see that things are pretty good. From that perspective, it comes up. And if I go to my contact list, right, we did this yesterday where we had the ability for us to add a contact, edit a contact, and delete a contact. We did full CRUD basically with our contact list. Okay, so now it's all around security. How do I secure stuff? How do I create a secure area? How do I show a user logged in and logged out? And all those kinds of things. And how do we do user management in general? So where we start off is some downloads like normal. So I'm going to go back to our terminal. I'm going to go and add a new terminal window here inside of our VS Code. And what we want to do here is add some of the things that we're missing. So one thing to always look at for me is my package.json file. So let's see what we have so far as dependencies. And you can see that, and I'm just comparing it with the previous project. So I can see that I have, from a dependencies perspective, cookie parser, debug, EJS, Express, HTTP errors, Mongoose, and Morgan. Those are the dependencies that we have right now. So we need to add a couple more things. One is going to be something called connect flash. Okay, so let's try and add that in. So npm install connect-flash and then -- save. Okay, so let's be the first one. I'll talk about what connect flash does, but more or less what it does is it creates an error message in real time. So instead of loading your page, it does it asynchronously inside of your pages. So you can add a message area in your login and register pages, and then it'll say something like your password's incorrect without having to go back to the server necessarily and do a full kind of a full loop of the server, going there like a kind of a full pass. So this is what this does. Connect flash. Okay. And then we have to add in some more. So we don't need, I'm going to add it in. We probably won't need it, but I'm going to add it in anyway. npm install express-session -- save. There we go, Express session. Okay, and then we're going to keep going. Lots of little installations we have to do today. Passport. I'm doing them one at a time. I can do them all at once, but I'm doing them one at a time because I want you guys to see it. So that's Passport. That is one of the key ones we want to use, right? Okay, so Passport. And then there's two more. Passport local, right? That's our local strategy. We're going to talk about that in a bit. And then as well as Passport local Mongoose. So okay. And I'm going to show you my npm, my package.json, so you can see what I have compared to what you have. And a lot of times what we want to do is we want to get more, just maybe have everything match. And there we go. So that's those. So then what your package.json file should look like is this. Okay, so something like this. So connect flash, cookie parser, debug, EJS, express session, HTTP errors, mongoose, Morgan, passport local, and passport local mongoose. And that's what I would have as well. And that should give you enough to get going. I can see that a lot of these modules, since the last time I did this, have improved. Some of them have stayed the same, which means zero improvement, or very little. But passport local mongoose has undergone quite a bit of stuff, right? I'm not getting any freezes. Are you? What do you mean by freezes, Spence? Are you talking about like internet freezing, or what are you getting? I'm freezing up on you. Yeah, you know what? When I'm downloading, that can happen. So I'm broadcasting live. I'm also, so that's, I'm also broadcasting on YouTube. I'm also, downloading from, from different sources here. So that can cause a bandwidth disruption. And I have two connections going. I have one over here, which I can see your comments, and then one over here. So I've got maxed out probably. All right. We also talked about ways of getting more code hinting for us, and you can do that by using TypeScript. We talked about that. I'm going to do some additional installs to help us out really quickly. So I'm going to install some of the things that I want help on. For example, I want help with Node, Passport, and a bunch of other stuff, and you can get that through using @types. So let's try this out. I can do an npm install @types like we've done before, and then let's look at things like connect flash, and then --save -dev. -dev means development dependency. Remember, it's not a project dependency. So @types connect flash will get code hinting for connect flash through using TypeScript basically. So I'm going to add that in. You might get a freeze there temporarily when I do this. So if I'm freezing up when I'm downloading this stuff, you should see it. I'm going to show you my package.json file, kind of thing as we go. All right, so just bear with me while I install these things. So again, clear the screen again. npm install @types, and I want to get the ones I really need, which is, for example, express. And then I can do more than one. @types express-session. These are all optional. You don't have to do this, but I find that it's very helpful. And then --save -dev. So that'll pull down all my some of the types that I need. So @types express express -session or -session, and then I can do the next one. So again, I want to do it from mongoose, passport local, and passport local mongoose, and node at the end of the day, right? So we'll do it for all of them. So we'll say npm install @types, and we'll get something for mongoose. We'll get something for node. We'll get something for passport, and we'll keep going. Passport local, and then passport-local-mongoose. And then if I put --save -dev, they're all development dependencies. And what it'll do is it'll go out there and grab everything. Now if I fade out for a second, if I freeze out again, just bear with me. It's going to get better. But every time I figure that I do this, I might get a bit of thing. Let me just also stop sharing my video, which might help. That might be a little better in terms of performance. So let's see. I'm not sure if that's better or not. All right, so let's press enter here. And then what that's going to do is going to download all those things. Oh yeah, I love that one. Mongoose. Let's make sure we spell everything properly. Mongoose. Mongoose. There's no mongoose. At least not the one I know. All right, let's try that again. And that should do everything. That should grab all those packages for us. So now my package.json should look like this on the bottom. So add types: connect flash, express, express session, mongoose, node, passport, passport local, mongoose. So why did I do this? I think it's really great from a, to get good code hinting. And remember that TypeScript, VS Code specifically with TypeScript, what it does is it adds in more code hinting for you as you're coding. It's good. I always like better tooling with my systems to make my job easier. That's what I'm doing it for. Okay, so that's what these things are. I'm going to put this up on GitHub now. So if you missed something, or if you didn't have some of these things, or if I'm freezing out, you can look on GitHub. I'm going to say added passport and for authentication. So I haven't added it in yet, but I just had a passport in there. I haven't added the authentication system yet, which we have to build. All right, and we're going to push this up on GitHub. So those are all the changes. Okay, just because we added this stuff in doesn't mean anything. It only means something when we use it. So let's see how it works. So first of all, let's see the code hinting that we're going to get now. Do we get any better code hinting, let's say in our app.js? So what we're hoping is when we hover over stuff, then we're going to get more code hinting, which is what I'm looking for. As an example, when we hover over some of this stuff, and you're going to get it, you're going to see that you will get better code hinting. So a couple things we start off with, and again, please stop me if I'm going too fast, guys, because we need to get moving and grooving on this stuff today. Because if we don't, we're not going to make it, in terms of everything we need. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to my config folder, and in my app.js, this is where I'm looking right now. Okay, and we're going to start adding in different modules for authentication. Okay, so, and I'm going to add them in just after the logger, after line 6. So here's how we get going. Okay, so we're going to say these are modules for authentication, if I can spell today. And here we go. The first one is session. So we're going to have a session module. We're going to say this, we're going to require express session, which we added in. Okay. We're also going to do a bunch more. Passport, which are going to require passport. Okay. And that passport local is equal to require passport local. You can see it's right there, right? As a setting. And then let local strategy, and we're going to talk about local strategy in a second. So again, we talked about it briefly yesterday. I said that there's different strategies to do authentication. Remember, actually, I'll talk about this in 2 seconds. I need to talk a little bit about what this all is. Strategy. This one. Okay. And one more is let flash. That's going to equal to connect flash. Okay, so those are all the requires that we need. And that's just the setup for authentication that we got going on. Okay. So again, a couple of things to notice. So what is the difference between authentication and authorization? What would you say the difference is, guys? And I can look at the chat, or you can speak up. It's up to you. So authentication, and then there's authorization. What's the difference?
Authorization is like who has access and stuff.
Yeah, so authentication says, this is who I am. I am Tom, as an example, right? Authorization says, okay, I know that you're Tom now, but what can Tom do in the system? What does Tom, what can Tom do that I've given him access to do? That's what it means, right? So that's the difference between authorization and authentication. Authentication is who I am, or who am I. Authorization is, okay, now what can I do? And there's two very different things. And what we do sometimes, and you've probably seen this, is probably a review for you because you've probably done authentication in other systems, right? So it's not new. You've probably done it so you have roles. You can set up roles for people, like an admin role, as an example, or an owner, whether it's a database owner or database admin or whatever. So it's kind of similar here. Here, we're just talking about authentication. I'm just logging in, and what we're going to kind of say is when the person's logged in for us, they're authorized to do everything. Okay, so they got to do, it's like they're logging in as an admin. Okay, we're not giving them separate roles. You could, but this is a very simple example for us as we're, just learning Mongoose and everything else. Okay, so these are the first pieces. You need this part. Okay, are you with me? And if you're not, please speak up because I'm going to go. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that point. Okay, so next, so I've got this, and what I want to go is I want to skip down below where it says. So we've got this authentication part. We're going to skip down lower in the app.js around where it says line 46 here for me, which is about where express static. This is a static root for your public folders, right? Just around here. And just before your routing. So you have routing down here, and I have right here. I'm going to put another some code in here. So here's how we're going to do it. So I want to set up express session. So the session we're going to set up basically is a session object that keeps track if we're logged in or not. All right. So we're going to Appjs, and then it's going to be session, the session object we just made, right? And we're in the constructor of the session object. We're going to add in different parts. Now, if you notice, we're going to kind of create a secret, and we can kind of make it some secret, whatever you want here. This is something probably you could store away, stash away inside of a environment variable in real life, and then save uninitialized. Notice I'm getting code hinting. This is good. Is false, and then resave, right, is also false. I want to put those kind of options in. Hopefully you guys can see that. And these are options to basically set up my session the way I want it to be. You can certainly look up express session for options, but these are the ones that have always worked nicely for me. Okay, next, once we have this part, again, this is all configuration. We haven't done any authentication yet. This is just config. I want to initialize Flash. So initialize Flash. Flash is basically this little message that'll come up that says, hey, you're not logged in properly or whatever. And so I'm just going to launch Flash there. So I'm going to say, hey, Flash. And you can actually put in other options in here as well. I'm not putting any other options in here. I'm just literally just putting in app use Flash. Okay. Okay, so that's the express session. And then let's initialize passport. So there's a bunch of initialization here so far. So we're going to say app.use, and we're going to say passport.initialize. Okay. And then we're also going to say app.use passport.session, which is going to start off our passport session as well. So initialize actually, like it says, it kind of creates the authenticator, like it says here. That's why I'm giving you this code hinting stuff, because otherwise you won't get this level of code hinting without putting in those inputs, right? So I'm initializing Flash, which is kind of saying, hey, passport start, and then passport, hey, let's set up a session. Okay. So those are two things. What we need now is a user model, right? And we don't have that yet. I have to kind of skip out of this one. And again, if you save this, it's not going to do anything yet. In fact, if I press Control backtick and go to Node, you can see that I'm not crashed. I'm still good, right? Even if I save. So it hasn't deleted anything. It just made my my server object fatter. That's all it's done right now. So I've just made it fatter. I've added more stuff, but I'm not using anything that I've done. All right, let's keep going. So I've got this part, but I need in here, before we come back to this, we need a user model, right? Which we don't have. So let's get that done. So again, I'm going to go back into models, and where I have contact.js, I'm going to put in a new model, new file called user.js. Okay. That's our user model. Okay. And the user model is going to be very similar to what we did with our contact model, right? Remember, the model, it creates a schema, and the schema, it basically is a structure for how we want to put together our database entry, right? In this case, our documents and inside of our collection. So we're going to require, again, modules for our user model. And the modules we need are Mongoose, okay? We need Mongoose, and we also need Passport Local Mongoose. This is the first time we're doing this. Passport Local, spell it properly. This one, okay? So we need those two modules. And then we're going to say that our user schema is equal to a mongoose.schema, like we've done before. It's a constructor, right? And inside the constructor itself, right, we're gonna basically configure the new schema that we're making, the user schema. And it's going to start with username. We're going to put it all lowercase, username. And now you're going to see a more complex way of doing a type. Okay, so before, remember in our contact, we just had a simple type. This is like a string, a last name, a contact number, and so on. With our schema, we can have a more complex type, and it can become an object like this. So for example, our username, I'm just going to put the curly braces in different lines here so you can see it, is going to be its own custom type. We can specify the type, which is a string. And we can also say what is the default that we want to specify. We can specify a default value if you want. We can specify if you want to trim the username or not. And we also want to say if it's required or not in the database. We can say that here's our message for being required. Username is required, right? So what this will do is when we start using Passport Local Mongoose, we can actually put a little error message that says username is required if they don't put a username when they register. Okay. Okay, next. The next one is email. Actually, let's talk about password for a second. All right, so I'm just going to put password in here, but password we're not going to use. It's going to be encrypted and by Passport Local Mongoose, right? So that's what it's going to do. So we would normally have a passport, and you can say a password, and it would be like password is required if you're kind of logging in or whatever. However, we're going to comment this out because Mongoose actually encrypts it for us. We wouldn't want to see our password. So it's going to be, this is taken out because password is, or will be, let's say, encrypted, right, by Passport Local Mongoose. Otherwise, you'll have a clear text password, which we don't want. Okay, so that's what this will do for us. So we're going to continue. So let's say that would be one. We need also email, because we're going to use email for our users. So email. And to identify them, each user might have the same username but a different email address, which is going to be a differentiator. We'll say email is required, right? So again, same kind of thing, string, trim, true. We can also put a default if we wanted it. And finally, we also want to put in a display name, right? So this is part of the object. So again, we're going to say that display name is going to be like this, display name. So we have a username, but we also have a display name. And the display name might be, you know, Tom or some, I don't know, coded username that you want, right? So again, we say that display name is required. I also want to keep track of a couple pieces of information as well. You can also keep track of when yes, because username is like one. Normally, it's like one name. Like username is all lowercase. Username, you know, kind of thing. And it's not caps. Same thing with password when it comes to understanding. But display name is actually a property. All right, so that's why we're doing it. Okay. Next, we also want a timestamp of when it got created. So we can say that we can have a date type, right? And the default will be date.now. Okay, so that's going to be the default method, date.now. Okay, so that's going to generate a date for it. Okay. And then we can also do not just created, but what happens when we do an update. So we can say updated. So when it got created, when it got updated. And so we can have two things. When we can update our user information, we want to keep track of when that's been done. Okay. We also want to specify a collection. Remember how we did this last time? We're outside of the constructor. So here's the constructor for user schema, but schema takes in a couple of options. One of the things it takes in is this object, and the next thing is the collection type. So we can say that collection, the name is users. Okay, the users collection. Okay, so far so good. Now we have to configure options for the schema. So we're going to configure options for the user schema. And we're going to say that user schema dot plugin, it's not showing up, even though we should see it, is passport local mongoose is what we want to put in. And then with options, whatever the options are. All right. So we're going to get there for a second. That's the user schema. Now we don't have an options thing, but we're going to put one in right here. We're going to say that let options equal to, I know this syntax is funky, all right, but just bear with me while we do it, is we'll say missing password error. And I love that I'm not getting any code hinting at all, which kind of sucks. Wrong, missing password. And we're going to come back here, and we may decide to remove this, like I said, from a security perspective. So we're passing in options. So we're making an options object and passing it into the user schema plugin. Okay, again, this is just options. You can leave this out. These are all optional. Module exports now, user, capital U, right? And that equals to the mongoose module model, and we're going to call this model user, the user model, and we're going to use the user schema as the input. So model itself, it takes in the name of the model, the schema as an option, right, as well as a collection if you want to put stuff in there or not. Okay, so that's what it does. So that is our schema. Let's just go back and go through it again. So again, mongoose, require mongoose, passport local mongoose. Is this passport local mongoose require? We're getting these two requires in there. We're starting off with a new schema, a username, an email. We're going to encrypt the password by ourselves. Email, a display name, which is what we're going to use. We're going to pass the display name on from one page to the next. When it's been created, when it was updated, if we updated our user at all. The collection, the default collection that it's going to sit inside of in the database called users. This is like the users table, if you will, in other languages. And then some options, missing password error. if you want to use it. And this could be something that's local, right? That comes up locally for you, which we're going to show, as well as we're going to use a plugin, which nicely it didn't come up with our user schema. Of course not, right? And in our user schema, basically we're going to pass in Passport Local Mongoose as the option. Actually, you can see that I'm getting code hinting for this, which is interesting, isn't it? And the options, any kind of options I have. Okay, so that's what the plugin gives me. And then I export my user model out. Okay, so that is this part. And again, we always want to check to see, did I crash my system? And the answer is no, I didn't. And we wouldn't, because remember what's happening is until we use it, I'm going back to the app.js now. Okay, app.js. I got my users up for a second, my user.js, but I'm putting up my app.js here in the config. Okay. So again, we could see that, like I talked about earlier in the course, that things can get pretty complex. Okay, and sometimes you're like, but wait, why are we doing this? Well, there's a bit of a build-up, right? First we configure, and then we start to use it. So here's our Passport user configuration. So first we initialize Passport, then we made our user model, and then finally we're going to configure it. We're going to say app, let user model equal to require, and then we're going to go to where we were before, / models, and then into user. Okay, so that's basically going to get the user information, and it's going to put it inside of user model. Okay, so that's what it does. Okay, and then now our user model is something that we can create a user from, right? So we'll make an alias. We'll say that user, that's the alias, is equal to our user model dot user. Okay, this is just an alias. So create an alias for the user object. Okay, that's what it is. So why? Because otherwise I'd have to say user model dot user every single time. Okay, and I don't want that. At least the way we've written it. Okay. All right. So now the next part is I want to implement some kind of user authentication strategy. So we talked about a couple strategies yesterday. One of them is this local kind of user model, and the local user would be a username and password equivalent. The other one is using OAuth, which is using a third party like Google, GitHub, some other bigger provider. Microsoft has it as well. Basically to say, hey, because this third party trusts this user, then I trust this user. So for example, we can say it like something like log in with Google, log in with GitHub, log in with Facebook. We're not going to do that, but that is OAuth. Okay, here we're just going to make a local strategy. That's why we installed Passport local Mongoose, right? So we can do our local strategy. So we're going to say that passport.use, and then we're going to say what kind of strategy it's going to be. Notice we're going to get the strategy type. We're going to use user.create strategy. Okay, create strategy. So we're going to create the strategy from the user, and the user, of course, is using Mongoose, Passport local Mongoose, and so that's what this does. Okay, so user itself is the user model, but notice that user is of type Passport local model, right? Because we've configured the user as we did in here. We said that, hey, by the way, we're using Passport local Mongoose as part of our object, and we're passing in a plugin that are basically saying that we're going to be using Passport local Mongoose as our user schema type. That's what we're doing. Okay, and that's why we're able to, when we create strategy, we see that the user itself is of type Passport local model, right? So that's the username password type. Okay, and then we need to serialize and deserialize our user, right? The user info. And this what this does is it encrypts and decrypts. That's what serializing and deserializing does, right? So when I encrypt I cast it this user data as some kind of binary file or whatever, binary data sometimes in other languages, I create a structure. I serialize it in a specific way that can be understood by the system. And then when I read it back in, I need to deserialize it and decouple it and kind of load it in with my own way of understanding the user data as it comes back. All right, so I'm encrypting it and decrypting it, kind of. All right, so let's do this. We'll say passport.serialize user, and we'll say user, capital user dot, and we want to use serialize user. All right, now this is something that should come up because we have all our code hinting. And then we want to deserialize user with user dot deserialize user. Now you might say, well, there's a lot of duplication here. If we're going to do this anyway, why is it like this kind of thing? Well, it's like this because when we set up our user model the way we have it going on right now, right? We set up our user model so that way when we connect, when we use authentication, we connect, it automatically serializes and deserializes the user data. Okay, that's what it does. Okay. So that's one part. Again, let's check to see if we broke anything. The answer is no. So we're still pretty good in terms of our setup. So setup is taking us a bit of time, but for the most part now, it's mostly done. Okay, so again, we've done most of everything that we want to do, right? We have our index router and our contact router. We've connected to MongoDB. We've got everything going on. Now we have to do changes. We have to make changes inside of our structure when it comes to routing to make sure that only authenticated users can access certain parts of our site. Okay, that's what we're going to do now. So that happens in the router and in the controller areas. All right. So again, I'm going to go back to, for a second, I'm going to go back to routes and let's take a look at our index route and see if there's anything that has to change. I'm just going to briefly look at here. Yeah, let's do that. So far, if I look at my structure, I want to go to my routes, and I have my index route. Right, here's my index router. And my index router basically shows me a login page. Here's a login page, right? And the login page, if I click login, it's going to show me I want to display the login, right? So that is the getter, right? But I also need something in order for me to process my login, a post of some kind, right? So let's see what my login data looks like right now, and what do I get from it, right? So in my views, I can see that under content, I have login.ejs. This is what we made together. Okay, so basically what this is the exact same login form that we had before. Okay, which is a good thing. So this is our login form, and what we want to do now is we want to modify it just a touch, so that way, when we log in, we have some additional information coming inbound. Okay, so notice again we haven't used it. We're basically our login EJS. What's happening is this is just the meat and bones of it, but we're using our index template, and we're doing this through our controller, right? So if you look at our, if I go back to this, and if I look at my controller for the index controller, here's our index controller. You can see that when I go to login, I have a GET request, and I go to display login. If I go to definition here for a second, then it'll teleport me into what looks like the controller's file. You can see that, right? You can bring it up if you click on it. It's kind of a quick way of doing things. And the controller file, what it does, it literally just says, hey, I want to use the index, and the title is going to be login. And when the title is login, then show me the login process. That's what it's going to do. We need to we can modify this if you want, but for the most part, it's going to be mostly the same. Remember, in our IndexController, index view, which is here, we somehow, all we've done is we've done a switch. We said if it's a home, then do something, if else if it's about, else if it's contact. That's how we did it here. We can continue doing more else ifs until we have everything we need. So we can sit there and say, okay, well, what about if we have a login? What if the title is now login? All right, so we didn't do the other ones because I was going to let you do it. All right, so there's login. And we want to use a content login.ejs is what we're going to inject there. So just by doing this and nothing else, if I go back out to my page, and if I type in, instead of here, if I just type in login, we should get a login where we have username and password, okay? Like we had before, right? If that makes sense. Now, here is where we digress. We have to modify a couple things, right? I want to create a message area where I could put in a little flash alert, an alert that basically says, hey, you didn't log in properly or whatever, some kind of thing. We talked about this. This is our flash. So we're going to modify our, it's almost like a little div tag, right? That we're going to only inject when there's a message. If the message is positive, we're going to have a div tag. When the message is negative, then we're not going to have a div tag at all. And so the way this would be coded, if I go back to our code for a second, here, so if I go back to our login page, here's our login page. So again, we have some structure, as an example, we have our form, and it says no validate. We're going to get rid of no validate at this point, and we're going to say that our method for our form, right, is going to be post, because that's something new that we haven't done. We also want to turn autocomplete off, so we're going to say that that is off. We don't want autocomplete to work on our login forms ever. That would be a bad thing, a bad choice, right? And we have a form that allows me to put in your username and password and all that kind of stuff, right? But at the top, and this is just above the div tag for row, so this would be like, so we have our row, right, for the actual class. I want to create a new container. So a new container up here, way up here, okay? Actually, a new div tag way up here. And we're going to say is that %, and then we're going to kind of close it off afterwards. We're going to say %. Inside this area here, we're going to say that if messages, we're going to have a messages object. If the length of messages is greater than 0, so only when the length is greater than 0, then I want to open up a curly brace, right? Remember the curly brace stuff? This is like an if statement. We want to also close it off at the end, so we make our closing curly brace there, okay? If messages length is greater than 0, then what we're going to say is that we're going to make a new div tag. Okay, let me just turn off EJS for a second, turn back on HTML, just to give myself some Emmet support. And we're going to say that the class is alert, and then alert-danger, okay? So that's the div tag we want. And inside that div tag, we want to put in messages. We want to inject the message that we have. So we're going to say %, right, equals to messages, okay? So again, what this is going to do is we need to pass in a messages object in here, because if we don't have a messages object, it's going to error out. It's going to error out unless we do that. So before we continue, after this, we're going to have to go back, okay? So for the most part, everything else looks okay in our standard form. We have our value, and notice we have a name, right? And let's just break this down a little bit. So name, we have a name. We have is it required or not? Yes, it is. We can say we want to start our form with autofocus on the name. And we want to put our required last. Let's move this required just over here. Again, we're just modifying our form so we can see things in one line. So type text, that's fine for our username. Form control and contact name, these are all okay for ID. Name has to be proper. Username. ID is also not contact name. It should be username. Please make sure that it's correct. Username, because I don't know why it said contact name here. It must have been it's been a typo there forever, most likely, right? So this is again FA user, right, as an example, and then we have username, and then enter your username is what it's going to say. That's the placeholder, right? Or and then we're going to have some additional steering instructions for the. We're going to say that autofocus. Right, autofocus, which means that HTML5 is going to focus on the username first. That's the first place it's going to get when this form is loaded, right? And then we're also going to make sure that autocomplete is off. We don't want autocomplete to work, so again, autocomplete is going to be off. Okay, so we don't want autocomplete to be on at all. Okay, for this one. So that's kind of our username. We've got that. And then we're going to do our password. So password is the same. The type is going to be password, which is important. Again, notice that the name is username. The value that we have here initially is blank, right? That is the value. Okay, so value for these things. In fact, what we could probably do is leave the value off if you really wanted to. So the value could be left off. But let's rejig this thing again to make sure that it's in the right order. So again, required should be kind of the last thing. I'm going to put the required at the end. Okay. I'm going to put, we definitely don't want autocomplete on for authentication pieces. So we're going to take this part, and we did it the other way around. Make sure I'll fix that. So I'm just fixing up this thing so we have everything in the right order. I think this is probably the better order to have it in. We don't want autofocus for our password at all. That's for sure, right? It's still a form control. It's still a password. The name is a password. Name is password. And name is important because name is our variable name. That's what it is. So, so we're going to put that in there. Value is nothing. We start off with a default value of nothing and a placeholder of enter your password. That's what it's going to do. And that is basically our password. Okay? For registration, we can't do register.html. We don't have a registration page yet, but if we're going to have one, and it's not required for your lab 5, is we'd have to put /register, which is where we want it to go, right? That's what it would be, register. And we'd say register here. We don't have a /register, so it's not going to work. And I don't think I'm going to make it work at this point. And then what we also want to do is we want to have a submit button. So here's our submit button ID, right? And I'm just making sure this is good, guys. I don't want to mess things up. The class is button primary, like it says. And the value has to be login. So I'm going to just change some of this stuff up. So again, up until here, we're good. I'm just going to specify that the type is submit. The class is button. Actually, I'm going to do those things. And there's a value that I'm going to put here before our login. So value, and our value is going to be equal to login with a capital L. Okay. Again, I'm just looking at this. Sorry, I want to make sure this is going to be right. I may also want to do a cancel button. So let me just rejig some of this stuff here. So again, we have our text right, which is going to make us go to the right. And what we can do is inside this div tag, we can have a it's an input type, right? We can have an anchor tag where we have a with a class of button and then button dash warning. So another little button we didn't include before. And with the type, we'll say the type is equal to a button. We're also going to put in a value. So I'm just going to click on this for a second. So there's the button type, right? And this little button here is, it's going to have a little, it's going to be yellow, and it's going to say, do you want to cancel? Right, kind of stuff, right? So the value is going to be cancel. Value is going to be cancel. Okay? And that is the anchor tag. And the href is going to be slash. So think of what that's going to do. That is going to take us back to our main page, right? If that makes any sense. Okay? And that should work. Let's just go back to our route now. So we have our display login, but we also have a controller we have to fix. So in our controller, which is inside of our controller, our index controller. Here's our index.js controller. Then we have to modify this now, so it gives us more information. It gives us messages as well. Okay, so that's definitely something we want. And I'm going to go back into here, and I'm going to go into just a moment in my controllers. And what I want to do is in my index controller, so far at the top of my index controller, I just have this, right? So you can see that I have display home and so on. What I want in here as well is information that I'm going to use. So I'm going to, in this controller section, I'm going to include some requires now that I didn't need before, because before I didn't care about authentication, right? So now I do. So I'm going to kind of put in some stuff in here. So one thing I want is I want to say let mongoose equals to require mongoose. So I'm going to put that in there. And I also say let passport, if I can spell passport properly, equal to require passport. Okay, so I want to do those in there as well. I also want to define the user model, so I can get that here. So let's define the user model. We may have to do this a couple of times, right? And the user model is going to look like how we have it before inside the app.js. User model is equal to require, and again, it's going to be / models and then / user. All right, so we get a reference to the user model that we had made before, and we're going to give a little alias again. So user with a capital U is equal to user model dot user. Okay, that's the alias. Okay, so we're going to use here. And what I want to do is start injecting a display name in each of the objects here. So I'm going to say we're going to give it home. Everything is going to have home and then a display name. And why display name? Because when we log in, I want to show my display name in the nav bar. So I want to say display name, right, is going to be kind of the request. Notice that we only have a response object here right now. We're going to put in also a request object. So we're going to say request dot user, lowercase. So request user, is going to be the display name, or we're going to put if the request user exists, that's what this means, then we're going to take the request.user.displayName and inject it inside of displayName. Otherwise, if it doesn't exist, we're just going to display nothing. That's what this means. Okay, so it's actually a ternary operator. This is the condition. Does the request user exist? Yes or no. If it does, so if the user exists inside of our page, the user object, then great. Inject this. If the question mark says if it's true, then make this something that display name is going to be equal to. Have this assigned to display name. Otherwise, assign nothing. And I want this pattern to be in every single one of these. So that way, what I can do is I can inject this inside of my nav bar, which we haven't had a chance to do yet. So let's do that. So I did it here in contacts. We'll put it there. We'll put it in products. We'll put it in services. It's going to have to be everywhere, right? And as well, login. Our login has to have that as well. So those are the things we need, because it has to be there, right? So that is the display login, right? But not only does it need that, but it also needs, login has something special. It uses a different template where we also want to inject messages. So messages. And we want to say messages, we're going to say the request object, request flash, right? And we're going to put in there the key, which is login message. That's going to be the request, the login message if it fails. That's what the message is. Now, because we had messages inside of our template, it's only inside of our login template that we need it, because the other ones, I'm not even injecting messages anywhere. Okay, so that's why it's okay to put here and not here. Okay, display name, though, we need for everyone, so that's why we put that as a copy everywhere. Okay, and then we want to see if the user's already logged in. So it depends if the user logs in, what we're going to render. So we're going to say that. So check if user is already logged in. Otherwise, we don't want to log you in again, right? So we're going to say if request.user, we're going to have to change this in a second. If the request.user exists, then do this, right? And let's put a request object in there. We have to put a request object into all of them, because, and also might as well put next, because we're going to make it more complex. So I'm just going to copy paste all this stuff, because we didn't need it before, but now we need it. We need it now. So another request object also is going to come inbound. All right. So I want to make sure that not just the response object, but the request object is there too. And also next, just to allow us to go to the next request. All right. So this is the display login is this. If the requested user, if the user exists in the request object, that's what this means, then great. If not, however, what if it doesn't exist? So we'll say else. If the user doesn't exist, then we want to, if the user does not exist, we want to say, then log him in. Otherwise, don't log him in. Redirect them back to the home page. So we'll say return res.redirect response.redirect, and we're going to put them back to the home page. Okay, that's what this part does. So that is a more complicated way of doing our login information. Okay, and now let's, as we're here, let's do the next part, which is our module dot exports, and we want to make a new one called process login page. We haven't done this yet, and we're going to make the again request, response, and next object with the fat arrow function that basically does the following. Okay, so this is where we actually use our passport stuff for the first time. We're going to say passport.authenticate, and we're going to authenticate using the local model. Okay, we're going to open up a kind of a bracket here, right? the local model is going to have the following. It's going to use an error object, a user object, and an info object, which is going to, in itself, have another object inside of it. So it looks like this. Okay, so passport authenticate, right? Local user, and so on. And then what if there is a server error? If there's some kind of server error, then we're going to say that if error, we're going to return next error. Okay, that's what we're going to do. What about if there's a login error? That's the next kind of error we can get. We can get a login error. So is there a user login error? If that's true, then we want to say that if not user, so user doesn't exist somehow, then we want to say that request.flash, right? The login message, this is where we configure the login message, is equal to authentication, error. That's going to be the message we're going to use, authentication error. Okay? Otherwise, return res.redirect back to the login page, all right, wherever that happens to be. Okay, that's if there's a user error. Okay, and what if there's no user error? If everything is good, right? Well then, read the request object, right? Here's request.login. Okay, login, request.login. It's got to be made just like this. And then user, we're going to pass in the user object as well as the error object, which you can error out. I know this is complex. I do apologize, but that's how it goes, right? And again, we could have a server error on the other side. So we could have another error in here. So we could have another server error, another type of server error. You can get it in a couple places. This is between the server, the local server here, return next error, right? I did that wrong. Did I do that wrong? If error, return next error. Yes, I did. And otherwise, that's all we need. Otherwise, if there's no error, then return res.redirect, and we're going to redirect back to our contact -list. So what this means is if we come to this line, all is good. Okay? But down in here, we're going to actually pass in the request, response, and next object. And that, my friends, is the login part. So let me go over it again so you see it in all of its glory. And then we're going to get to actually doing the login, performing the login. Okay, so we authenticate. We use passport authenticate. And you can see that we're going to have the type, the authenticate method type is the first part, which is the strategy. This is the strategy, local strategy. Notice it says strategy, and then, or strategies. We can have more than one. We have a callback. The callback itself, it gives us our objects. So error, user, info, right? And error gives us the, if there's a server error. If not user, so somehow we don't get a user. So user, there's a login error. We just return a request flash. That's inside that flash area inside the login.ejs page that says, hey, you know, you've got an error, and it'll redirect back here. Request flash, what it'll do is it'll update that thing, and it'll show us the error, hopefully. Then request login. Notice that log in, and login is is a capital I, that is the case. It has to be a capital I. It's not login. It's request login that has to be in there. Okay, I know we're not getting code hinting, but that's, I was hoping we would. So that's what we need there. Then could be another server error that's in here where we return another error here. That should be a semicolon here. And then if we get to this line here, this final line, well, then all is good. We've logged in, and then redirect us back to the contact list. That's what it'll do. Okay. Cool. So that's what this does. Okay, so that is the login. Now we should be able to check it and see that we can't log in at this time, right? So let's try this out and see if this part works. First of all, control backtick. Do we have a problem? No, we don't. Okay, now we're going to go back out here and try it out. So we'll say something like, okay, Thomas, and then, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then click login. And it's going to go, cannot read property user of undefined. Okay, so this is where we have to check to see if everything is good, right? So it says, we have an error, cannot read property. It says type error, cannot read property user of undefined, right? And this is, we want to make sure we get this part because otherwise bad things will happen. Okay, so it could be a typo, and I got to look through the code now and make sure that there's no typo at all inside here. And it tells me the line, right? It says object display login on index line number 58, 11, right? So that's the 11th place. So if I look through there, we can say line number 58, request user, right? So if there's no user object, that comes back, right? So this is important because this is our, if no request user comes in, that's what displays login. And then our process login, it comes to this point and says, okay, we need a user, right? Kind of thing, right? So here's the user that we're getting inbound, user, right? From when we authenticate, right? So where are we getting user from? That's an important thing as well. So where is that coming into play? Because if we don't get the user properly, then it doesn't matter what we're doing. And I'm just going to make sure, I'm just going to skip through here and make sure that there is not a problem. I don't want to troubleshoot too much here. User, it's not capital user, it's lowercase user. And again, I'm just checking through this to make sure that I got everything properly, because this is what can happen. There's a lot of details, and this can cause a big error, right? So just looking through it here on my end, bear with me here while I do this to make sure that this little piece of code that I've given you is correct. So let's just put it the same way. So let's suppose that's here. Error user info passport require response request and next. It should be the other way around. Doesn't really, that's what the problem is. Request response and next. Look at that. Did I do the same thing everywhere else? That's a problem. It should be request response and next, not that's how simple it can be. That this is the order. And why? Because these objects mean something, right? So that's the problem. Request response and next, not response request and next. So that's just going to be something we just modify really quickly. And that should fix it, because there is no response user. There's a request user though, right? Because response doesn't have a value right now because we're not responding yet. We're just requesting. So the request comes up with a user information that comes from the user model, right? Okay, so that should fix it. Let's see. So save. Again, no errors. See, we have this 500 that came through. Look what happens. It says login username is equal to Thomas, password. It actually did it here locally. And we had a 500 error, which means it's a server error that came through, right? And this is what it output for us, so we know what happened, okay? This is good. I mean, kind of. All right, so let's go back to this and try again. So Thomas, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just going to actually refresh the page because I want to make sure that we can get to login properly. login. And it says cannot read property render of undefined. Okay, so it says that okay, let me take a look here. Okay, so display login. Again, these are just little minor errors here, and it's on line number 60 and 9. So position 9 is what that is, right? So let's see what that looks like. So line 60. Again, we see we have 500 errors. That's a server error problem, right? So this is where we don't die. So res render is correct. Request response and next. Request response and next. And that's up here. Sorry, I just want to make sure that this is correct. Request user. And then we're going in there. Res render. If the rec user doesn't exist. If the rec user does exist, then it wouldn't go there. Else redirect back to the redirect. Sorry. And I want to make sure that we're good, because otherwise we're not going to be good. We won't be able to continue here. Res render auth login. Title login index. So we're looking at, and we're saying the title is login, right? And that we're spinning off of login. Then request flash, request user display name. Just going to see where the problem is with this. So make sure everything is saved, right? And let's just redial back. I'm going to restart the server just for a second and see if I can get to the login page, because I want to see what that problem is. So res render still has an issue on 19. If you guys, by the way, if you guys see it, and if you're following along, then you're going to be able to help me here. Res render. Somehow this res object isn't defined. Why is that? On line 60 it says. Did I not copy something properly? Auth login index is where it's going, yeah. Comma, curly brace, title. Try without the if else. Where?
Just right there where you're looking.
Like take the else away?
Yeah, just to see if it renders the page without checking for stuff.
Oh, without this if requested user is there? Yeah, we can try that. That would be me doing something like this, just commenting that part out. So I don't think that's going to fix it, my friend. Let's just do that for a second. So you're saying do this and to see if it works, right?
Yeah. It's
no.
not the same as everything else.
Yeah, no, look. So if I go to login, actually let's go to contact list. Wow. If I go to contact list, we're good. If I go edit, that's good. But if I go to login now, what's happening with login? What is it doing? Login. Then it's giving me this, render undefined /login. Why is that? Where we were working before, it's not working now. So res render, and all we had before was just a request, a res object. We had it like, just like this actually, is what we had, right? Yeah, see, now it says request is not defined. I'm just curious. That's what I'm saying. I'm just curious why this is working. So request is not defined. So we did this, res, response. Oh, this request user now. Okay, so we'll just comment this out because we can say that. And same thing with this. Just this is what we had before. I just want to see if this works. Oh no. Right, and this is where. Remember I said that we have to have the messages in there or else it'll fail. Messages not defined. So let's put that back. Let's put messages back, but we will put in just something for messages right now, but nothing that's going to kill us. Let's try that. Again, this is just troubleshooting 101, guys. We'll get through this. Just a matter of, okay, so that, whoa, that's a weird button. What happened there? All right, so that means our, in here, we're going to go back to our EJS page. It might mean our problem is somewhat in here. Login EJS, and where we had a cancel button. So here's our login button. Button for login. Yeah. Value login. Value cancel. And if I refresh, wow, look at that. How small that is. Why is that from happening? Oh, we didn't put in cancel. So cancel. Value is cancel, but we didn't put in the cancel. That's why it's not showing cancel. And cancel seems like it's smaller than login. Why is that? Oh, because we use button large here. So we'll do that too. We'll say button dash large just to change that part up. And then that should be the same size now, login and cancel, which is nice. Okay, so now if I press login, it's going to pre-fill this field. This should error out now. So I say, if I say Thomas, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and if I press login, then it should error out. Not found. Right? Not found error. What's not found? Like a oh yeah, because we didn't put in a route for that yet. Okay, so this is good. So this is good, but we have to fix that other problem in a second. So let's go back to our routes. So one thing we don't have is a put as a post. I mean, so we're going to say router. Okay, so we're going to get the post login page. So we're going to process the login page. This is going to display login page. So again, it'll be router dot post. And then slash login, right? And then we're going to pass in the request response and next object. Oh, I see what the problem is. Request response and next. That's so silly. Okay, so look what we did here. This is something that's the error that we're getting, right? Because we don't know anything about the request objects. We never passed it in, right? So this is also going to be changed. So all these have to also be changed because we didn't need them before, but now we need them. Request response and next. Let's make sure we get all those in. Otherwise, we'll have all kinds of lovely problems. Sorry, this is on the routing side. And again, we could have done this differently, but it is what it is. Request response and next all the way down. Yes, so that's our problem, Sterling. And I was like, wait, how come we're not getting an object? Why? Because we never passed it in. That's why. And what we want to do here is we want to say controllers dot process login page, and we're going to pass in request response and next. Good. That's done this part, and let's go back to the oh wait. Let's go back to the controller, which is our index controller. And let's put some of this stuff back because now it should totally work. So this can be back because we do have a request object now. And we're going to have a display name. So we're going to get all this back. Press flash. And that should uncomment all these things, which should produce the effect that I want. Okay, good. So that's display login, that's process login, and that's why we couldn't get to the process login page. We couldn't even get by the display login page because there was a problem. All right, so now are we still good? We are. Okay, now.
Request the next object.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. See, I'm just running out of time, and I want to make sure that I get all this done for you guys, right? Because otherwise, Lab 5 will be undoable. All right, so refresh. Okay, good. So now let's go Thomas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I want an error. Yes, this is the error that I want to talk about. This is the connect flash working for us that says, hey, there is no Thomas user. What are you talking about? Kind of thing. Okay. So we want to go to the register page. We want to click on register, and of course there isn't a register link yet, which we're going to make. So we can register a quick user here too. Okay. Even though this is not required, we're going to make it, and we're going to process. We're going to do the display the register page and process the register page all in one. All right, so we can get it done. So it's not required, but here we go. There's request login, and this is all of our process login page. The display. So again, module.exports display register page, right? That's going to equal to, again, a request, response, and next object, right? Which we're going to make a fat arrow function out of. The request object is going to be very similar to what we did before with our display login. We're going to say if not request user. So if the user's not logged in, check to see if the user's logged in already. If not user logged in, then we want to register. So we're going to say res.render. We're going to register the index page, right? But we're going to pass in another object. So this is going to be very similar to what we've done with this. It's almost going to be identical, in fact, to this part, right? So I'm just going to really quickly just copy all this part and just modify it so that it says register and not login. Okay, so that's what this is, instead of me typing it all in again. All right, now this is going to be the index. This is going to say register, right? And instead of a login message for our flash message, we're going to have a register message, right? Request user, all that stuff is going to be all the same, right? And we're going to redirect back to the main page if somehow that doesn't happen. Okay, next, let's do the process register, which is slightly longer, but not too much, right? Here we're going to make a new user for the first time, and we're going to use it for ourselves more than anything else. So we're going to say module.exports, right? .process register page, right? And again, it's going to be the request, response, and next object. Okay, so that's this part. Now let's put this on the next line. I don't like it when it's like this. This way you can replace whole sections of stuff or comment things out like we did. And then we're going to define a new user object, right? And the new user object can be let new user equal to a new user model, right? Where we define the user. We're going to have our username as request.body.username. We're going to have our password would have been request.body.password, but we're not going to do that. Okay. We're going to have our email as a request.body.email and our display name as request.body.displayName. Okay, so that's where we're going to make our new user model right there. Okay, this thing. Okay, so that's that. And then we're going to use user.register, right? And it's going to be our new user object that we're going to pass in the request body.password. So we're actually going to use it here. This is where we're actually going to get the password before we encrypt it. And then we're going to pass in our error for all those errors we had before. Remember, we had all those error things happen. So this is how we start off a registration. So then if error, so if some kind of server error, then we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to console log it. I want to console log the error. What error are we getting? This is important because this way we'll know the error that we're getting. So maybe it's inserting a new user. We want more detail here because we want to get information on what the problem is. Is it a database error? Like, what's the problem here? If error.name, right? is equal to, and this is the errors you can check for. So for example, user exists error, user exists error, right? Then we can actually kind of make a flash message for this, request.flash. We shouldn't, but we can, where we can say that the register message, right, is a registration error, right? User already exists, right? So if the user exists, we don't want another user here, right? That could be an error that we can get. However, we just should probably put in registration error, console log error user already exists. Okay, let me see if that's right. Yep, that's if we have an error. Then, otherwise, if it's not one of those, then we want to return res.render. We want to return the we want to res render the register page, so the index, right? And we're going to go here, and the title, we're going to take it back to the registration. What this does is if we have a problem, then we're going to take them back to the registration page and get them to register again. So actually we're going to do this part again, okay? But we're going to keep it here because we want that request flash. So it's almost all this stuff again. So we're going to do all this again, all right? So res render, but we're going to do this part. Sorry, I just want to make sure that it's correct. This part and in there. Okay. So require flash, register message, da 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 da. Okay, that's here. And then this is if there's an error, right? And let's make sure that this is the right level. If error name exists. If error name exists. Hold on a second. Console log. Okay, actually this is in here. Hold on a second. So request flash, console log, and then return. This return happens actually in here. Just a moment, guys. Sorry. I'm looking at reference documentation and it's messing me up. Okay, so this is in here. So if there's an error, then we want to return res render. Otherwise, if there's no error, so there's no error, we want to register the person, right? So we want to say that else, if no error exists, then we want to redirect the user, redirect to the authenticate page. We want to authenticate them. Actually, we don't want to redirect them. We just want to authenticate them. So we're going to say that return passport.authenticate. We're actually going to log them in. Local, and we're going to use our pass in the request response object as well as a anonymous callback that where we redirect them to the contact list. Redirect to the contact list. So if everything goes well, he's logged in or she's logged in, and we're gonna, no error exists, then we want to, then registration is successful, and we want to log the user in. Log the user in, because that's what this is going to do, right? Passport authenticate that whatever the user is, local request response, and then pass in the user back to the, and then redirect user to the contact list. Okay, that's what this part does, if that makes sense. And that is registration. Okay, one more part, and then we'll go to do the routing part. Module.exports .perform logout. We need that part too, right? Which is going to be, again, the request, response, and next object, and request.logout is what it's going to be. And then we're going to redirect back to the main page. Okay, so that's what this does. So that's the perform logout. So we have everything here. Let's put this up on GitHub so you have it. So I'm going to go here and I'll say added or updated index route. Okay, that's what this is. And then I will push this up. So you have all that stuff so that you're not missing anything from this part. All right, now we need our, that's on the controller side. Let's go on the router side and fix up the routes for register as well as logout. And then we'll fix up everything so that it works for you. I may run a little bit late, it looks like. So if you have to go after we're going this, I'll keep going. And I'll keep making the video so you have everything you need here. You may have to watch a few minutes past the time after me. Just a note that next week, again, we're going to have before we continue, we have the test that's going to happen on Tuesday. I'm going to make a little announcement where you have all week from Tuesday to Friday to get it done. And then your lab 5 will be due Friday at midnight, which gives us plenty of time to do any kind of troubleshooting and Q&A, right? I will reserve Tuesday's afternoon session for Q&A for lab 5 and anything else you have. But I'm not going to hold a formal lecture during that time, okay, like we said. Sorry, so let's get back to routes here for a second, and let's see if we can finish some of this off before you guys go so you can see part of it working. So I want to I get the display register page. That's what I want here. And I also want a post for process the register page that I want to do as well. All right. I also want to get the logout page. So perform logout. That's what I want to do. All right. So I want to do these 3 things. So the first thing is let's do router.get, and we're going to router.get /register. That's the link, and then it's going to be IndexController, or the controllers, right? Display the register page, right? That's what we want in here. And just like we did before, we want this part to be in here. So we're going to have request, response, and next. And then here we're going to do this part where we're going to pass in the request, response, and next object. We could have done it in one like you saw, but I didn't do it that way. I'm also going to do the rest. I'm just going to copy paste here just to make this quick. Hopefully I won't make too many copy paste errors. So instead of get, we'll put post in here, request, response, and next, and this will be process register page. Process register page. That'll be that part. And this will be log out. So this will be log out. And this will be perform logout is what we called it. Perform logout, request, response, and next, which should do everything we need. So that is your complete route for everything. So we've got that part done, right? So register, everything else. Now, in order for us to register, we have to monkey a little bit with the views, right? So first, I'm going to monkey with the login. Sorry, the index.ejs page. We have to do another detection. So we're going to say, well, what if it's a it's a register page? Well, then we want to go to register. Make sure that we type it in properly. And what if it's a logout? Well, then we want to go do the logout, right? So log out. So title is logout. Now this is going to be interesting when we get title logout. There is no title logout, so we're going to see that this is a problem in a sec. But we want to do the logout.ejs. There is no logout.ejs. We're going to have to make one. And we're going to have to figure out a way, something to do there when there's a logout. Actually, probably don't even need this because it's going to just give us a route. So nothing for us to render. Okay, so let's go into the register part and do that. So I'm going to go into content register and fix this part really quickly so we can get that part looking good. So again, it's going to be very similar to what we had before inside of our page for the login page. Okay. So again, we need this like top level container. So I'm going to go and look at that login again. So if I look at the login page, I have this little piece right here, which I'm going to steal. This part. I'm going to go back into the register page and pop that in before the main content div, right? So just right here. So that's where it's going to go, right? And what this basically does, it's going to put in just like that little alert danger with messages. Like we said, if messages.length is equal to whatever, then that's how it's going to be, right? Our method for the form, so again, a class is login, that's fine. But our form can't have no validate, and it's got to have a method that is equal to post. It has to have the post method, right? Autocomplete should be off, so it doesn't kind of fill that in. And we have our first name and last name ID should be kind of consistent, first name and last name, right? Placeholder should be there. Required should be there. And then we also need a name part, which is first name and last name. So first name and last name is there. We have those pieces, right? Let's make sure, did I forget to put that in? First name, last name? I may have. Let me just put that in. Let me go back into the index, the controller for 1 sec, just to make sure I didn't mess up completely. So this would be bad. So process register page, username, yeah. So this is where we didn't add in a first name, last name, right? Because that is something else we made, right? We need a username and an email and a password and all those things. So that's something that we need differently than what we had. So going back into our register page then, we need a username. So that's what we need here, not a first name and last name. We don't care about this stuff so much. We need a password, we need an email address, but we need one of these, not both of these. So we're just going to get rid of this. So we need, instead of a first name, we need a username. Username. And this would be, ID would be username. This is important because if we mess this up, then, and the placeholder would be enter username, right? Which is have to be there, right? Autocomplete is definitely going to have to be off. So again, we'll just separate this so we have everything we need. And I like to put the ID up here. Sorry, I know if we're timing out, guys. If you have to go, totally understand at this point. But I'm going to get this done. So name is here. Enter username. ID is username required. And autocomplete is off. Definitely going to put that in there too. Autocomplete is equal to off. We need to put that in there because otherwise we'll have a problem with auto-completing. We also want autofocus to be on our username, right? Because that would be really good, right? So it starts with our username, autofocus, right? So that's our username. Okay, then the next one is should be password, and that should be kind of instead of it being email address and then password, it should be password and an email address and then display name. So I'm just going to move these around so that they say the right thing. So this is going to be from this form group. I'm just going to grab this form group and move it in here. So this should be password. Again, the placeholder is password. The value is nothing. The name is password. These are all good things that we're having to do, right? So this is this. We'll put this at the bottom. We'll make our placeholder enter password, right? So we say something in there, password lowercase. We'll also put autocomplete complete. We'll make that to off so that we're not going to have an issue with auto completion, right? Value is nothing. We didn't have a value in here, but I think that's going to be okay. And the type should also be password, which is really good. Let's just get rid of some of these extra spaces. So this is our username, password, and then email address. I think we made our name email. Let's just make sure that that's correct. Again, I'm always going back to the router, because if the router is incorrect, so my controller, I'm looking for email, username, password, email, lowercase, and display name, right? So that's really important to get it right. Otherwise, it'll be a problem. It'll be a big problem, right? So email, lowercase is what we want, not email address, email. And we probably should make the same thing for our ID. Email as, not that it's required or anything else, but we need to put that in there. Placeholder is enter email. So we're just going to rejig these things so that we're in order. Enter email. And then autocomplete is off. We should probably put that on as well from a security standpoint perspective. Okay, so that should be everything. And then there's only one more thing, which would be confirm password. I'm not going to confirm today. We're not going to do that. That would be a validation check, and I'm not going to do that. But what I will do is enter display name. So that's something that I can copy paste. Actually, I'll get it from the, because this is type is email. This type is text. So I'll get the user, and I'll copy it, and I'll put it down here. Just to make sure that we are good. So this will be, the text will be display name. And the same thing goes with the name. Enter display name will be what we say here, display name. And autofocus we don't want. We only want autofocus one place. Okay, and let me make sure that that is correct. Type display name, autocomplete off. And then for our buttons, we're going to have a submit button. It's going to be button primary, button large. It's going to be register. We're also going to give it a value of register. So value is equal to register. Okay. I'm just going to put this on 2 lines here so we can see it, not because I need to. And then, like I did before, I'm going to have a cancel button. I like having a cancel button because of the options it gives us to back out, right? So we don't want to, do something. So HTML, and we're going to have an anchor tag with a class of button dash warning, and then might as well put button large. In fact, what we could probably do, we can grab the same one from our login page, which is this exact part right here, this part, and go back into our register page and paste it in, which is probably better than me typing it in. So cancel, which will take us back out to the slash, which should do everything we need. And I think this is good. This can't be, you have an account already, then it's slash login. That's what this is going to be. Okay, save. And let's see if this works. So again, control backtick, we're all good. We're going to go back to a login page. Let's see if it routes properly. Login. Login's good. Well, we don't have a login name. Let's register. Register. It's going to ask me username, password, email, and display name. Let's put it in. So we'll say Thomas. Our password is 123.456. Let's say our email is tom@example.com. Our display name is Tom, and register. Okay, so user is not defined. This is where we're going to go next. Again, we're going through the whole gamut of troubleshooting here. So again, we're timing out, guys, but One thing we can check is to make sure that did it actually do what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to go back to here, and we get a 500 error, which means chances are it hasn't done it. And to check this, we can go and do the Mongo shell, so Mongo, right? And we can look at show DBS, which shows our database. So we can get into MyDB, so use MyDB, right? And then show collections. We should only have one collection right now, contacts. When we are successful, we'll also have a users collection, which we don't have yet. Okay, so this is kind of a key that we want. So now it said the error that we got, going back to this, is user is not defined, and we can look at our process register page again, line 131.3, 131.3 for process register page. So let's take a look at that. Your user is not defined. We had that problem before. So again, going back to the controller for index, our process register page, and we say user is not defined. User is not defined. Rec user. Maybe that's what they're talking about here. Rec user down in here. And new user, username, email, and display name. We're going to be good. We have a new user. If there's an error, then if not, then we're going to return to here and register with a requested user. So there's the request body.password. I think this is where it is. Let's see where it is. 131. 131. Yep. Rec body password. So around here is where it's saying is where the problem is. Display name and new user. So why? So rec res next for process register page. Process register page. We do the same thing with everything else, yeah? What about our route for here? Routes, index. And did we do a typo? Process register page, request, response, and next. Post. Request, response, and next. These should be semicolons, but that's not going to error out. Didn't give us an error for this. And guys, like I said, I'm right at the end, so if you want to take off, you can totally do that. If you want to stick around, I'm going to keep going. So just to make sure that this is complete for you. Process register page. So we have a request object we're passing in, and it's missing the user object. The user object. Why would be missing the user object be a thing? Maybe because we didn't save? How about them apples? But then did we do anything different here? Password 123456. Better make sure it's right, because then, and then enter email. Error. Okay, so that's okay. 131 is where it says. It says process register page inside of the server controller's index. Now notice this is a great way of troubleshooting because it tells us where the problem is. There's our route 60. So this is our call stack. So first it goes to the route, and then from there it goes to the controller, and inside the controller on line 131, position 3 is what it's saying is the problem. So if I go to my controller, it's not here, it's in my controller on line 131 or around there, position 3. This user register, that's what it's saying. It doesn't understand user. Okay, let's take a look at my documentation and see what it should say. Yeah, it should be double. It should be a capital U, of course, because user register. We're registering with our passport local model. All right, so that makes sense. Save. Going back to this. Are we good now? Let's go back to our node. We're back up and running, which is what we want, and we're going to see the collection in a second. Let's go back here and try again. So Thomas. and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Enter email, tom@example.com, and then Tom, and then register. Yes, this is a good thing, guys. That's a really good thing, a really good result to take us there. That means everything worked. Now to check it, because we can't see anything up here yet, now let's show collections. So collections. And you can see that indeed we have a users collection that got created for us. So we want to say that db.users.show, remember, .pretty, and we can see that db.users.show. How about I type it properly? Show, or find.pretty. I'll be okay. Show. Yes, and this is what I was hoping to see. So take a look at that salt and hash. So this is interesting. So what it totally did was it did this. It says here's my ID, here's my user, here's my email, here's my display name, here's when it was created, here's when it was updated. These are the same because unless I update this again. And then take a look at my salt and pepper. So here's my salt. Salt means this is a kind of an encryption key. And then here's my hash. And this long hash is my password. So that is how it does it. It's very interesting, the way it's been done. How does this connect? Hamza, I'll have to continue. You'll have to connect with me another time for me to answer that question. But do you see how this works? So this is where we have our user. Now we should be able to log in, but let's perform a logout first. We don't have the links for this yet, but we will. So we have to go in here and go, let's log out. So if we put log out and press enter, it'll redirect us back. Now we're logged out. That's why it worked. It came here. And let's log back in, which should be Thomas, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is a correct login. Oh, yeah, that's a problem. Okay, so this is where I'm, the next part, what we're trying to do, right? So part 1 and part 2. So Thomas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make sure that we put that in properly. That's wrong. So something went wrong with our authentication. Let's see what happened now on the back end. And so there's, you know, again, we're testing on both sides. So to make sure that we're good to go. Did we get an error? We did not. So this is something that's happening in the way that it's reading my password. So starting node server. Okay, let's just restart. Okay, and let's try that again. So refresh and log in. Okay, cool. What if I do it again? Oh, is it Thomas or Tom? What was my, I think my username is Thomas is what I used, right? And we're going to try and do that again. Yeah, because Tom definitely won't work. Right? Try Tom. Yeah, I know. Oh, Tom lowercase. I don't think so. I think I used Thomas. Pretty sure. It's not letting me in, which is good, but that's not letting me in. But bad because I know that I used the right thing. Could have typed the password in wrong too, which is also something. Let's go back and do it again. So let's register the same user twice. Let's see what happens when I should get an error with that as well. So if I go back to the register page and try and register them again, I can say that my username is Thomas, right, as an example. And that, see, that just gave me a hint right there of what the problem was. I think I know what the issue is. It's capital T that I used. And then that should work. No. Okay, so let's just register again. We'll say I'll register Thomas 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Same name, tom@example.com, and Tom is the display name. Register. And now we have a registration error that says the user already exists. This is good, guys. This is what we want because it detected that we're trying to install a user that's already been installed. Okay, let's get rid of them. We don't have full CRUD here, but we'll get rid of them and try it again. Let's make sure that I didn't type anything wrong, or I just can't remember the password because I'll never know the password now. So if I go back to here and if I say db.users.drop, then we just kill the users database and we'll try and register them again. So we'll say We'll use Tom this time around. Okay, Tom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Make sure that I type it properly. And then Tom at example.com. Tom and register redirects me back. Let's check to see what we have here. So find pretty. We can see that Tom is the username, right? Display name is Tom. And then Tom at example.com, and then this big hash. We don't know what that is, but we don't care. And now we'll log out, which is important to do. And then log back in. And now we know it's Tom, lowercase Tom. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to check the code. If this doesn't work, then it's a code error. Okay, so that definitely is a code error. Let's go back over the code again. Because this is, we know it's working because it's stopping me from authenticating. I don't know what the problem is, and it's not giving me any debugging information here because it looks like it's okay. So that means it must be something that I put into the login page. Funny enough that this logged us in. So you see that when we came here, this actually performs login. So passport.authenticate local with the request response and next object, we're actually passing in the request object, which is doing everything for me. Right, so this actually is working, the local. But something up here in the login, so not the register page, but actually the login page, there's something messy in here. And again, a couple things. This could be wrong, like login, could be login, right? And let's see if that is wrong, or it'll give me an error. If there's an error, it'll give me an error here if I try this out. So if I say, you know, Tom, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then it'll just error out, right? Like it'll give me an error in here, right? If that was the problem. So that is definitely not the problem. So this, something is wrong here. Request login is a real issue. Something that's going on in here, and so inside of our authenticate is the issue. And now I'm going to check it. So go back into the authenticate part.
You should also be using a capital U.
Are you sure?
I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I have to look through it, right? So it's hard to differentiate this one. User, error user, if error, return next error, if not user, request flash. This is working because we're seeing this problem come in. Okay, now what about this one? Request log in. This should be a capital I somehow. It's showing me a capital I that I see. I'm going to go check the documentation in a sec. If user error, so we're passing in the user, and we're passing in the request response and next object. This is the part that we actually do everything. We actually perform the login, request redirect to the contact list if all is good. Otherwise, if there's an error, process the error. So are we actually even getting there to this point to request login, or else are we doing something totally wrong? So let's see something. Request flash, res redirect to login. Yes. And this is if there's no user. If there's a user login error. So what is the user login error? Can we get that information? So we want to populate that out. Whatever the error name is, I want to take the error name and spit it out. So let's see if we can do that. So if there is a user login error, don't just show me this, right? Let's pump out the error that we have. So we'll say error I want the error that I want. So I want the error that I'm getting. What is that error? So let's first of all, let's do a console log of the error that I'm getting. Am I getting an error first of all? So Tom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, what am I getting in the console? Null. I'm getting null, so no error. All right, so what would be the thing that's causing us to have an error? It can't be authentication problems. Authenticate local. Request response and next as an object. error, this is troubleshooting. Info, error. If no error, no user, then we're getting down there. And then otherwise, if there's no error, and if there's no user, request login. Request login. With the user information. Well, what are we getting from the request? Let's see what the request object is. So let's do a console log of that request object. Right? I want to see what I'm getting. So Tom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's right. It's a massive object I'm getting here. So this is okay. Just really long to troubleshoot. So flowing, sync, socket, pipes, and blah blah blah. Writable, parser, request, circular. Okay, that's different things. Method post. Workers, using workers. That's the original URL / login. And what I'm looking for is the request user. All right, well let's see if I can get the username and the password. Maybe those are wrong, right? So let's check those. So let's go and do that. So I'm going to say that request.username. So request.params is what I want. What are my parameters that I'm getting? So Tom and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do that login. Oh, that's bad. All right, what is in the login page? Maybe the login page is giving me the wrong information. Username and password should be these two fields. That could be the problem as well. Let's chase that one down first before we get to this, because request's not coming through, and that's a real concern, right? Because that's my process login page is not going to work if I get the wrong request. Let's go into our views and go and do login, and let's see what I'm getting here. So just checking. So password is password. That's the name. Username is there it is. There it is, guys. See? Should be lowercase username, not ugly username. That's why we're not getting it. We're like, wait, username is wrong. Well, of course it's wrong, because username is not going to be registered. It's not going to come through as something that makes any sense for that user. So name is username, password is password. Okay, let's try that now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. Oh my God. All right, so that is that part. And that makes me happy that we were able to figure that one out. So that is registration. That's what this does. And so this is a completed version. Let's put this up on GitHub before we forget. So we're going to go to GitHub, and we're going to go added login and registration. Actually, login, logout, and registration. Now we just have to put some. We have a little bit of UI to do, and then we're done. And that's it. All right, so this is good. Check mark. What did we do wrong? Changes. Stage changes. What happened? Oh, unsaved changes. Okay, so let's save all. Let's go to here and save all. And let's go back to here and add this one too. And then we'll do it. Push. Okay, so that does everything we need for that part. Okay, so now there's a couple parts we need, and then we're done. we need a way of differentiating whether we're logged in or logged out, and somehow some way of locking pages down, right? Which is kind of the next part. So again, guys, if you have to go, totally understand. I'm running way over time. I've done some troubleshooting that slowed me down a little bit here today, and it is what it is. This is how it works. Usually I have a whole extra hour for this thing to do in one, and I don't have that right now. So let's just continue. At least I'm going to continue. All right, so next part. What I want to do is in the nav bar, I want to show my user login and logout, and this is kind of what we were talking about with Heather before, which was like, hey, can we not show the login now that we have our in that partial, right? So again, in the header, what we want to do is when the user is in, we want to show the user like the display name kind of stuff as something we want. So I'm going to go into views, I'm going to go into partials, I'm going to look inside of my header.ejs, and inside the header we have all this, right? And now near the bottom we have this contact that, or login, that always shows, but we want to put in a couple of extra pieces of information. So in here I'm going to put in percent, right, if type of display name, right, equals to string, and we have a display name. Okay, then we're going to surround everything with this. Okay. Oh. So display name is there, and then I'm going to say that we're going to make a new list item. So I'm going to grab an example of list item right here, right? So we're going to make a list item, and the list item is going to have a class, again, there's not going to be an ID, so I'm going to get rid of this ID. The class is going to be navbar text instead of navbar item. So this is just going to be text that's going to show up on the navbar, right? Nothing that's clickable. We're going to put an I tag in here. So an I tag with a class, I'm sorry I'm typing it by hand, but this is how it has to be right now, of FAS, FA-large, and then FA user. So that's going to be the little tag that we're going to put in, right? And we're going to have a little message that says welcome whoever the name is, right? Which is % equals and then display name. Okay, so whatever the display name is, hey, display name, how you doing, kind of thing. And we want to put this inside of the LI, right? So we're going to end off the LI here. Okay, so that's going to be the display name. That's going to be in there only if display name exists. Okay?
Spell user wrong.
Sorry?
Spell user wrong.
Thank you. And then we want a list item of logout, right, to be there as well. So I'm going to put in a list item, just like I have login here. I'm going to grab this and put it in. So we're going to say something like, I want a list item, and the class is equal to nav item, right? We don't care if nav item being active in this case, right? And then we want a href that equals to /logout. So this is where the logout link is going to be, right? With a class that's equal to nav-link in there. So that's going to be the anchor tag. And what I want is inside the anchor tag itself, there's going to be an I tag. That's going to be I tag. That's going to have a class of FAS, FA large, FA sign out, right? Alt, which is going to give us the little sign out object, right? And I'm just going to bring this back up so we can have the proper spacing in here. Otherwise, we're going to have a big space. And then there should be logout. Okay, logout. That's right, logout, Tom. Okay. And that's going to be if the display name is a thing. If it's not a display name, so this is if, and then we're going to have an else in here. So we're going to have %, and then curly brace, else, okay. And this is where we're going to have the other link, this part here, the nav item active, right? And actually what we could do when we're logging in, right, we want to have a when we're actually at login, we want to have like active, but here we just want to do this for now. So I'm going to grab this and put that in there, nav item active for login, right? We want to have an anchor tag perform the login like we've done before, and all of this to be there. So grab all of this, right, and put that here, and we'll split it off properly so that it looks like the other ones. So class nav link, and we'll just put this down here, and yeah, FA sign in alt. Did I make this large? I did. I might as well make this one big too. FA dash large, just to be the same. And then sign in alt. And that should be what we need from there. So now I'm going to get rid of all this because I don't need this anymore. I'm going to come back to this little conundrum we're going to have in a bit. Okay, so this should be showing our display name in the title bar. That's what this should be. Let's see if everything works. I'm going to save this and go back out to here and refresh, which should show us log in, right? So if I click, why am I not logged in? Because I had to reboot the server, right? So log in, I put the name, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it should show us in here what we have, which is our user, but we don't see it, so somehow it didn't come through. The display name did not come through. So the way to check this is a couple things. So one, let's me check my logic. Did I save everything in the header, right? So string equals to string display name, type of display name has to exist. It means this exists plus it's also a string. That's what it means. And li class navbar, then welcome to this, but it didn't do this, but it actually did this part. That's what it did. So because otherwise this wouldn't have shown up either, right? This will only show up, right, if and only if that there was a display name that came down, right? So display name for whatever reason did not come down the pipe, and so it didn't show. Otherwise it would have, right? So let's check to see our router now. So we're going to go back to our routes. So going back to our routes index, and this is where we have everything here. Routes index, and just want to make sure that we have everything here correct. It looks like it is. I don't see a problem with this part. So what about our controllers? And this is probably where the problem is. So display name under home is request response user.displayname, and let's check that out. So I'm going to go back to controllers index, and let's make sure that we send everything we need to. So display name is like this, and let's make sure that display name is actually captured, because we're saying rec.user.displayname is coming from our user model, right? Because that's what's going to hold our information. Otherwise we're not going to see a display name at all, and that's not going to really be good. So So what is the display name, we could say, when we come through. So let's go to, again, I'm going to go down to our login page here. And login basically does its job. Let's go and look at our Mongo shell and take a look at what I've got. So the display name should be Tom. Display name is spelled correctly. Display name, right? Again, these are all considerations, right? If I made a mistake, then it would come out. And so I have my request user object that I'm getting, and I'm not able to hold my display name somehow. Okay, well, what if I go to my, I want to go back to my display page, so my display home, and I got home and display name. Let us see what the rec user display name is. So let's just, in here, I'll do a console log, and then show me what it is. Show it. So again, I'm going to go home, and display name is not defined, right? Well, it wouldn't be because I'm not logged in yet. So display name, we'll say, we'll do one of these. Display name is equal to this or this. Okay, so we can check it this way too, just making a little temporary object. I want to see what's happening here. So we should see nothing, right? And refresh, nothing. This is good, but what do we see in here? We're seeing nothing, right? Good. Now what we want is when we log in, it's going to take us to our contact list page, and so that's where we have to see it. So here we will save, make sure we save, and then here I want to take this piece, cut it out, and I want to go to my contact list page, which is our display contact list. Oh yeah. Well, there you go. That's why it's not working. Because we did everything for my index, but not for here. So our contact list now, right? Display contact list needs more stuff. It needs a display name stuff, right? Because that's what we're missing in our contact list. We've gone to the next level, right? And that makes sense, right? Well, at least to me. Hopefully it makes sense to you too, because what's happening is the contact list, it needs a couple of pieces of information now. So we're passing into another level, and so we need to let the, we'll say this, we'll say let's contact model, right? Which we have our contact model. Sorry, we did all that already. But we need inside of this place right here to pass in our display name. Display name is equal to request.user or request.user.display name, right? Which is this. So request user. So request user is equal to this or this. Okay. So if so basically saying is this: if rec user exists, then take the display name and store it inside the display name or nothing. And we need to do that for every page inside of the contact list page. So this, we need to do that for this. We need to do that for anything else that has kind of some kind of thing like this, right? Anything else that we're rendering, we should have that display name now, because otherwise we're not going to show it, right? Contact number. Yeah, these are all looking good now. All right, so let us now go back there and try logging in again. So log in. So we're going to go Tom 1 2 3 4 5 6, log in, and then welcome Tom. Look at that, welcome Tom is showing up, right? And then it shows my logout link. So that kind of works, right? You can make this glow green. You could do all kinds of stuff to make it look interesting. I'm going to click log out, and now it's going to log out. You can see I have to log in again, and this is the first part to this, right? So Tom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, last part is basically blocking. So I want to block my contact list, so I can't get in there unless I'm logged in. And for this, there's a bit of a thing that I got to do on the contact controller, not the contact router. So the contact controller will do exactly what it's doing right now. There's nothing that's going to change here. This is just going to do what it tells it to do, right? It'll do the whole thing. But on the router, and this is where we can lock down the router for the contact router so that it does the right thing. And let's do that. And that's the last part. And then we'll see. I'll say sayonara to everybody. All right, as things look like they're working so far. So under the contact router right now, we've just given access to everything. There's no blocks in place. But here we're going to put a block in place, and it's going to look like this. Let passport equal to require passport. Okay, and then let's we have this part already. We're going to make a new little function, a local function. That's what this is going to be. So some kind of local authentication function that I'm going to make, right? And the local authentication function is going to be a function that's only local. It's not going to be shared. So it's going to be called require auth, and it's going to take a request, response, and next object. Okay. And the request and response, this is going to be check if the user is logged in. That's what it's going to do. It's going to check to see if the user is logged in. And if it's true, if not request dot is authenticated, that's what it actually is. If not request is authenticated, it has to be exactly this. If not re-authenticated, then what this is going to do is it's going to return a response of redirect back to the login page. Okay, so not logged in, go back to the login page, and we're going to call the next event that's going to come up. Whew. That's require auth. Let's make sure it's correct. Request response and next.
Send a message too.
Yeah, we could send a message.
Like say like you're not authorized to view that page.
We could, but then it would flash away, right? Because what's going to happen is if you go there, we could cause it. We can make an error. We can send them to an error page, but I'd rather just send them back to login, right? And login we could actually put a little login error that says inside the request flash that basically says not authorized, something like that. For now though, I'm not going to do that. And so now this is where it gets funky. This is how easy it is. Once I have this little require auth function, I can just put it in between these things like this, because this can take multiple arguments, right? This is the beautiful thing about this. So I can actually just go in here and just put them all in. So I don't want to be able to do adding or even see the ad page or even doing the editing. None of this should be able to be done, right? I shouldn't be able to do any of this stuff if I'm not logged in. And that should be it. That's locking everything down right there just by doing that. So basically what we're saying is, hey, is the user authenticated, right? If the user is not authenticated, I'm just going to make sure this is spelled correctly, right? Then this is going to return false, and it's going to redirect us back to the login page. Okay. And let's just make sure that I am good, because I don't want a problem with what I'm doing here. Okay, it looks fine. Let's try it. So again, if I refresh, it's going to take me back to the login page, and that's a good sign, right? So if I go and type in, if I go in here and type in like contact list, and we're back out. See, I can't go to the login page anymore. I can't even go to anything like that, right? Even if I knew the link. So if I go contact list, takes me back here until I log in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then if I log in, takes me back, and we can see the page. We can do all this stuff. We can do all this stuff, right? I can change this to 555. I can edit it. All that stuff is good. But as soon as I log out, and if I go back to the contact list, then we're bad. It won't allow me in there. Whew. That's it, guys. 36 minutes over, but that's it, right? So that is the completed authentication piece for everything that you need for your Lab 5. So any questions before we depart? Because I think I've gone over it, and I'm sure you're tired. With all the stuff we've done. Anything else? I'm sure it was. I think, part of it is understanding how things are put together with Node. And so troubleshooting is always a part that we want to, get going with this, right? So let's put this up on GitHub so I don't forget, because that would be catastrophic for you guys. So I'll say lock down the contact list pages, okay? From here on in, if you followed everything that I said, with some minor changes, your Lab 5 is done. I was talking through the problems that worked. Good. I'm glad that you understand what's happening. So that's really it in a nutshell, guys. Any other questions for the people that are online? I only have 3 people on, but the rest had to go. Any other questions for you guys?
No questions.
Spence, you're good?
All good.
Okay. So, guys, thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate the fact that you stick around. But this is everything you need that you're going to require for Lab 5. We didn't get a chance to put this up on Heroku/MLab, and there's no way I'm going to spend another hour to do that with troubleshooting. So we're going to remove that. I'm going to make an announcement, and we're going to remove that from the requirements of Lab 5. Okay. However, if you can figure it out, that's a great thing, right? So that'd be awesome if you can try and finagle that on your own, right? It really isn't that difficult. What we need to do, and just to give you hints on how that's done, you know what I'll do? I'll make it a bonus for you guys to figure it out on your own. So people who need it, this has to change. The URI can't be Mongo localhost MyDB. It's got to be the URI that's given to you by MLab. Really, that's it. I mean, if you just give me this, if you give Heroku this URI to connect to Mongo, it's going to fail because this is local, right? But if you give the proper URI for MLab and everything else, it should just work. And that's how simple it is. Okay, so I will provide a bonus if you can get it working with MLab and Heroku. I think I'll do that, and I'll make an announcement to that effect. Otherwise, guys, you've been awesome. It's been great working with you guys, and especially that you guys have been always there for the most part. I will be in on Tuesday again. I'll host a session, but there won't be a lecture. It'll just be a Q&A. Okay, so any other things that we need from each other? Otherwise, I'm good to go. Okay, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, no problem. Thank you, man. I really appreciate your patience. All right. So take care, and I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys next week. I'll log out now.
All right.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Take care.